Okay. Ugh.
Hi, Gila.
Okay. Okay. Tal?
Yeah, hey, how are
Okay.
you?
Okay, great. No, because it said Tal's talking. I'm like, I don't hear her. What's wrong? Okay.
Oh.
Hi. Okay. Ah, bangs. Okay. Ah, that's what I forgot. Okay. So, we'll wait a few more minutes. How is everybody? You guys don't have to go on video or whatever, but how is everyone all over the US holding up? How is everyone? Is everyone's family okay? Everyone's businesses, family safe? Give me a little update for the worried Israeli person here. Okay? I'm going to assume everyone's fine. Yeah? Gemma, we're really fortunate. Yes, we are all really fortunate, thank God. Okay, good. But in a revealed way fortunate, like everyone's families are safe and dealing with stuff in the best way possible. Okay. Tal's doing well. Tal, you're in LA? I remember correctly? Or I remember wrong? Crown Heights, okay. Okay. Moving to Florida. Ah, okay. Okay. Yeah, Rena, Toronto didn't get too crazy because you know us Canadians, we're wild. You know, like you really know you pissed a Canadian off if you stepped on their foot and they didn't apologize. Sorry, my foot was there. Sorry. Well, you appreciated that, right? We fling maple syrup everywhere. Right. Okay. Life. I got so much crap from my family for not being like anti Black Lives Matter. I've been getting hate mail from my family members all week. Whatever, all week, since like, you know, Thursday or whatever. Hold on, admit. So funny, the previous generation is like old school, and I get their concerns. I get it because oh yeah, Rena, you and Avi just had a discussion about what? Like about getting flack from family for like actually not being racist and for acknowledging that white privilege is simply a fact. And yes, it's true that Black Lives Matter has an inherent anti-Semitic, anti-Israel part of its platform. That's a fact. Anyone who is in denial about that, that's what it is, denial. Just like Farrakhan and many very militant Black leaders, including Malcolm X, you know, had a whole anti-Semitic side to them. But to say that's everybody in a grand sweeping generalization, that is so intellectually dishonest, unfair, and complete BS. It's like, yes, that's like saying, wow, all Jews are Kachniks. Yeah, of course. Of course all Jews are Kahanachai, of course. And like, no, that's just not true. Not every Jew believes you should like, you know, kill the Arabs and whatever. Sarplan, good nice start, right? We start, you know, flinging poop a la tchala, right? Like right from the get-go. Ay. So you know this is why you show up, right? You thought we were gonna do shoftim and like all the juicy stuff. You were like waiting for the schmutz. Stop. Rena, I agree with you, but still feel that what they're doing isn't right. So, pacifist Latina. Wait, Rena, no one is justifying inappropriate behavior. It's just a question of separating. It's not even a question of fact from fiction. It's just generalizations. It's like the one time that it's incorrect is that all generalizations are incorrect because there's always going to be the population. Now, you always say it's also about numbers. Okay, yeah. You know, like, I'm sure there's some lovely KKK people. Maybe not. But you know what I mean. Like, okay, yeah, you can't generalize. But the point is that, like, again, as so many protesters and protests testify, there are plenty of people that just want Black Lives to matter without subscribing to the whole anti-Zionist rhetoric. So let's just call a duck and put things in their correct place, etc. I think the idea of defunding police is very dangerous. Oh my God, no, we're not choosing this tangent because, yeah, that whole thing of like getting rid of the police, that's just Looney Tunes. That's really like, what? Wait, who's speaking? Sarla. Yeah, that's just absolutely crazy. I mean, yes, the police are corrupt, but like, get rid of the police? Sorry, one of the kids took me off mute. Okay, fine. Kids are so, yeah, the world is going absolutely crazy, but like more so than usual. I'm just saying my German grandfather raised me to make sure we always had valid passports. So you guys finally making Aliyah? You know the house 2 houses down from me is for sale, Rita? Cough, cough, hint, hint. My neighbor, Rita, the sweet house. Seriously, 2 houses over from me. Remote Jerusalem forest is your backyard with like gazelles and foxes and hedgehogs wandering in the background. You got a puppy. Right, that's true. Okay. You know, the puppy would have plenty of room to potty train and run around with a nice big backyard next to our house. I'm just saying, Rita. Just saying. Okay, peoples. By the way, you know that like half my street is Toronto Olim, right? Like the people who built my neighborhood is all Torontonian transplants that moved here like 40, 45 years ago and just like literally chiseled the houses into the mountain. Who wants coyotes? Foxes are cute. Anyway. So, like Rena, you remember Renee Rosenfield? So her cousin is my next door neighbor. And then, anyway, we'll play Jewish geography later. But the point is that, like, yeah, it's a whole Toronto mafia here. We did not know this when we bought it. But anyway, just saying. Oops. Okay. All right, ladies. So first of all, I want to thank everyone that sent in questions because basically I have a heck of a time trying to write these shiurim when I don't have questions because I have nothing prompting me with like a direction, you know, because you guys know me, I hate lectures, I hate lecturing, I hate like, it's as far to my comfort zone as possible. I like dialogue, you know, so when people send me questions, it's like, okay, it's literally like, it's like the difference, if I have to write a lecture, it's like me sitting in a car with my foot on the brakes and in neutral and like not being able to move, you know, just like, okay, I'm gonna take my foot off the brakes, I'm gonna switch to drive, I don't know how, but we'll figure it out. Versus literally get questions, it's like, oh yeah, baby, accelerate, okay, we're good, like, let's go. Anyway, so Sapir, I have to high five you, girl, because you sent fabulous questions. In fact, one of the like major bullseye questions that I'm going to open with, and also Sarah Plutkin, also excellent questions. I'm trying to remember who else sent. Anyway, so basically, guys, obviously feel free to pop up the questions, you know, here if something comes up. Okay, one of the great things that Sapir asked from the get-go, because she noticed a strong tonal shift. And that's like, this is why I was being a nudnik before for the first 3 chapters, saying like they're one unit. Even though the Christians divided it up, you know, into 3 chapters, And it may very well be 3 chapters, just not the way the Christians divide it up, but it's one unit. It's one like literary unit with one headspace, and the writing style is similar and the voices are similar. And there's just something that like gels the unit. And then all of a sudden there's like a sharp tonal shift in the writing, right? And that's really one of the telltale signs that there's a new chapter. Like as Jews, we don't even need to be told and cued when there's a chapter, because we know by ourselves, because it's just listening to the rhythm of the text, to the writing. Like, for example, the Gemara itself, which again, if you bear in mind, is like what, 800 years before the Tanach was divided into chapters, it's already discussing where is the shift from chapter 1 to chapter 2 in Sefer Kohelet, right? Which again, is not where the Christians put it, which totally messes people up when they try to learn Kohelet. Because the Gemara says, oh, chapter 2 starts, in Pasuk Yud Bet. It doesn't say Pasuk Yud Bet. It quotes the Pasuk, which in our days is Pasuk Yud Bet of Perak Aleph. But the Christians put it like 18 or whatever it is, or 10 Pasukim later, because they're like, listen to the text, listen to, like, the person talking just sounds different. So here too, there was one tone until this point, and then all of a sudden there's a very administrative tone. Like instead of being like a saga, emotional, sweeping, a story, all of a sudden it's like just almost like a statistics report. Okay, this is the, like, almost like a minute, of like, okay, who's in the cabinet here, this, that, and so the tonal shift already cues us in. Curtains close, curtains reopen, new stage, new everything. So basically, Sapir said, who's speaking? Because when it sounds like it's a prophet or Shlomo or whatever, that's one thing. But when it's the narrator, we always have to ask ourselves, who's speaking? From whose perspective is this being written? And that's a super important point, specifically for Sefer Melachim. The Gemara in Bava Batra tells us that Yirmiyahu HaNavi wrote Sefer Melachim. There are many books that open with telling us who the author is, right? Like, Sefer Yonah, Yonah ben Amittai, Migat Chefer, okay, we know. And many books that just tell us straight out who the author is. And many books don't tell us. That's what the Gemara in Bava Batra in page 14ab, all the way to 15ab, is discussing authorship in the Gemara, authorship of the Tanach. It tells us Yirmiyahu wrote it. Now, why is this important? Like, okay, nice. So there's multiple reasons why this is important. A, when we know who the author is, sometimes it can also tell us what their agenda is. Because anyone who tells you that something can be just written sheerly factually, just objectively, that's nonsense. That's not true, because no human is capable of being objective. They can try. They can put in a noble effort. But sheer objectivity, I don't think that's actually possible. And in my book, agenda is not even a dirty word. As long as a person doesn't claim to be objective, as long as you're transparent about your agenda, right, then that's totally fair game. Like I always used to like talk about how, yes, I am an Orthodox Jew, I am a woman, I am a political right-winger, in terms of Israeli politics. And so it's like, yeah, I have an agenda. When I read the Tanakh, that blatantly colors the way I see the text, and I see what I want to see there. And I can't take my head off and like put someone else's head on my shoulders. It's actually a Russian expression. Like when you're frustrated about like, someone not sharing your perspective, you say, you can't take, your head off and put it on their shoulders. But that's just the fact. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just the fact. And so I see with my eyes and with my perception and my experiences. And so I can challenge myself to see from a different perspective. But I can't claim objectivity because that's not possible. I can't see a male perspective. I can try. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be offended by certain things that don't jive well with me. And I don't assume that my perspective is the fact. Like the Tanakh isn't wrong because I'm offended. It's like, you don't like it, but the Tanakh has a truth to say, regardless of how you feel about it. So basically, with Yirmiyahu, yes, he has a very clear agenda. And it's especially important because later, his agenda becomes a foil for another, I don't want to say prophet, because there's a machlokas in the Gemara, whether this person was a prophet or only Baal HaRuach HaKodesh, only someone who had Ruach HaKodesh, we'll call it divine inspiration, which the Rambam in Guide to the Perplexed, in the second section, because there's 3 sections to Guide to the Perplexed with chapters in each one, so he discusses the different levels of prophecy, and he says the very bottom is Ruach HaKodesh, and then there's like another, I think, 11 rungs of prophecy, of nevuah, that at the very, very top rung is Moshe Rabbeinu's level of prophecy, which is called clear lens prophecy, or aspaklaria me'ira, as it's called in Aramaic, which is what we just read on Shabbos yesterday, right? Panim el panim adaber bo, that Hashem says, I don't need altered states of consciousness with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu can be completely conscious, and he's so nullified that he can receive divine transmission in his conscious state. Whereas what does it mean when Hashem tells Miriam and Aaron, right, like I will speak to all prophets except for Moshe through dreams or through visions. So that's just simply different forms of experience of altered states of consciousness. So you want to call it a trance, you want to call it, being asleep, it doesn't matter. It's that the consciousness has to be dormant in order for the yeshus, the self of the prophet, to also be cleared away, so that he can be just a complete empty vessel and receive prophecy through Keter, through the unconscious, right? Because the unconscious is unlimited. And so basically that's all Hashem is saying. You guys need to be asleep so that the unconscious is accessible, and that's how I communicate with humans, except for Moshe Rabbeinu. And so basically Rambam very, very poignantly says Ruach HaKodesh is not nevuah. It is a completely different experience. It's actually funny because he writes like he's experienced everything firsthand, because he's like literally describing a level of nuances. You would never confuse Ruach HaKodesh with, like, let's say the third level of nevuah, because what do you mean? This feels like this and this feels like that, and like, why would you ever confuse them? That's like saying to, like, a blind person, would you ever confuse green and purple? No. So Rambam is writing from that perspective of like, who the heck would ever confuse Ruach HaKodesh with the first level of nevuah? So basically, I was talking before about Ezra HaSofer, who wrote another book that is painfully similar to Shmuel and to Melachim, right? Most teachers and most students and most schools avoid learning Divrei Hayamim like the plague. It's considered one of the most boring books for one simple reason. It's considered like a sug bet, like a, how'd you say sug bet, like a second level or like second tier Melachim and Shmuel, because it basically reiterates the stories that appear in Shmuel and in Melachim. So everyone's saying it's not as interestingly written, and also it like adds a few details, but it skips a lot of details. So why would I ever read Divrei Hayamim? I would just rather read Shmuel and Melachim, the original. So much more interesting, much more details. I'll just skip Divrei Hayamim. What people don't understand is that there's a dynamic between the two books, that neither book was written in a vacuum, even though there were several decades, between them, right? Because bear in mind, let's just get a timeline happening, right? Yirmiyahu is writing when? Anyone? Yirmiyahu's career is, so he is the prophet that escorted and doulaed the Jewish people like a significant amount of time before the destruction of the first temple, during the destruction, and after the destruction of the first temple. Thank you, Rina. Exactly. Churban Bayit Rishon. Exactly. And then Yirmiyahu passes away or whatever. We don't really know what happens to him. There's conflicting midrashim about what happened to him after the destruction of the temple, some very crazy midrashim. And then Yechezkel is next up. Wait, I mixed up Ezra and Yechezkel when I said decades. I meant much more time between Ezra and Yirmiyahu. Sorry. Anyway, the point is that then Yechezkel takes over and he also like started his career as prophet during the destruction and then mostly after, helping the Jewish people rise up from their despair. And again, he had a heck of a time just trying to get through to them because they didn't want to listen to him. They didn't want to listen to any prophets. They're like, look what God did to us. Like, forget him. So basically, how many years were the Jewish people in Babylon in the exile after the destruction of the first temple?
Was it 7 years?
Exactly. 70 years, right? And then we started building the second temple. And the second temple, it took such a long time to build it for a plethora of reasons. I mean, they lacked finances, they lacked Jewish motivation. It's like every time that, somebody would stand up and say, okay, go build the temple. And I'm talking about not just the prophets, I'm talking about that there was even a Persian king, Cyrus the Great, who founded the Persian Empire, one of the first things that he started with that has been archaeologically proven, by the way, because until this archaeological artifact surfaced, the only document that we had that testified to this occurrence historically happening was Divrei Hayamim and Melachim, right? Pretty sure it's Melachim, not Yeshayahu. Where basically Koresh, Cyrus the Great, stands up and says, okay, Jewish people, get up, and I'm giving you money, power, whatever you need. Go build a temple to your God in Jerusalem, return to your home country, and go for it. You know, you don't need to just be like, you know, good citizens of my empire. Be faithful to me, be loyal, pay your taxes on time, and we're good. You don't need to worship my God, worship your God in your homeland, which Cyrus the Great is often accredited with being the first leader to attempt democracy, way before the Greeks. And he ended up being a failure. History will say that he failed. You know, the ancient people were not ready for such largesse, for such generosity, and such like wide scope thinking. But he attempted it. And so basically, we had a pasuk, right? The very last pasuk of the entire Tanach. Literally, if you flip to the last page of your Tanach, last pasuk is Koresh saying, Mi Hashem Elokav imo vayal. Whoever feels his God is with him, he's talking to the Jewish people. And he says, so arise and like go to Israel to build a temple. And you guys can Google the Cyrus cylinder, where it doesn't call it the Jewish people by name, but we actually found the clay document that he released when he assumed his throne. And he basically writes there, liberating all the minorities, saying, go worship your gods. I will give you political power, financial power, total autonomy to worship your gods. I think he calls it the Moabites by name. He calls up certain minorities, saying, go worship Kamosh, go worship, you know, whatever. Live in your countries. You don't need to all live where I place you. And, you know, and so he doesn't call it the Jews, but here, like a lot of the psukim and Divrei Hayamim are echoed in the Cyrus cylinder, you know, certain psukim. So suddenly we had proof that, oh, like Ezra didn't make that up. That was like a real historical event. So Ezra, basically the reason the Jewish people, it took them a long time to build the temple, they themselves didn't want to get up and go. So they just didn't have enough people to get up and do it. And then when you have the stragglers come, so there were horrible conditions. There was drought. Drought means depression, right? Economic crash, no crops, starvation. And other than the fact that when you just have like a few Jews there, and the majority is the Gentile inhabitants who've been living there for at least 70 years, if not more. So like they're basically helpless. So they're just basically, you know, going against the tide. And so by the time they're able to scrounge together enough funds, it was built very, very gradually over decades. So the first step is Ezra coming to Israel. Machlokes exactly where it fits in Megillat Esther, but somewhere around the time of Megillat Esther when it ends, basically. Yes, I know it's a machlokes. It wasn't before it ended, but I'm going to go with that timeline because it just makes the most sense from the Gemara, from the Pshat, from everything. And so basically he starts the process of rebuilding the temple. Well, again, not the temple. The temple stood as ruins for centuries. All they were able to rebuild in Ezra and Nehemiah's real time was the altar, the walls around Jerusalem just for simple protection, and they would like rebuild it a little bit here and there as soon as they scrounged enough funds. But it basically stood, you know, Solomon's temple stood in ruins for a long time. So why am I telling you all of this? Because so Yirmiyahu is writing Sefer Melachim after the destruction as a way to help the Jewish people hold or pick their chins up, because they're basically in a complete and utter state of despair. And like, of course, they just went through the worst atrocity that they've been through in half a millennium, right? Because the first temple stood for 410 years. So basically, after 410 years of perfect autonomy, religious autonomy, political autonomy, everything autonomy, and like all of a sudden, oh my God, we don't even know which way is up. So Yirmiyahu has to basically tell them there's still hope. So the first thing he does is he writes a book through prophecy, right? Melachim is in Nevi'im, so it means it's Nevu'ah, it's not Ruach HaKodesh. Writes a book of prophecy, basically, you know, like going through history, right? Starting with monarchy and ending, right? The very last chapter in Melachim Bet is describing how the Judean kings from Beit David lived in Bavel. What was the relationship like with Babylonian kings? Like, were they slaves there? What was it like? And he basically goes through that entire timeline. Zugesund. So what now the interesting thing is that if you compare and contrast the different details that Yirmiyahu includes and Ezra omits, we'll see a very interesting picture starting to come out. Ezra's not trying to just be a, like pathetic version of Melachim. He has a completely different agenda because he's living in a completely different time. And so his whole reason for Divrei Hayamim and for quoting the stories that he does quote is to fulfill this agenda. So what is that agenda? Okay, so the two main differences between Melachim and Divrei Hayamim is that in Melachim, we'll see that the structure of the entire book is a ping pong match. We are going to, after Rehovam, the son of Shlomo, basically destroys everything his father and grandfather had spent 80 years building, right? He comes and the Jewish people split once again into two kingdoms of Yehuda and the 10 tribes, as it was under Shaul, basically, and before that. Basically, then it splits into Yeroboam ben Nevat leading the 10 tribes, Rehovam ben Shlomo leading Yehuda and Binyamin, and then the Davidic dynasty rules over only 2 tribes. And then you have each time a different dynasty ruling over the 10 tribes. So basically, the way Yirmiyahu writes the book is a ping pong match. It's like, so this is what's happening in Beit David. Oh, we now pause for station identification. Cut! Now we're going to see, so what happened in Mamlechet Aseret HaShvatim, Mamlechet Yisrael? Oh, so at this time, do you know what's happening with the 10 tribes? So they went to war against this nation and they built this and they did that. And then cut, okay, back, like jump cut back to Beit David. Meanwhile, in the Davidic dynasty, right? And then it's going to go back to, and this is what's happening. And so the whole book is written as a ping pong match until chapter, I think, 17 or 18 of Melachim Bet, which is when you have the destruction of the 10 tribes, Mamlechet Yisrael, right? The Assyrians come in and exile them, destroy the kingdom. And so basically for the last 120 years, it's only Judah and Israel. Like Yehuda and Binyamin, right? You only have the Judean kingdom, you don't have the 10 tribes because they're scattered all over Asia. All over. Big machlokes at the end of Masechet Rosh Hashanah, whether the 10 tribes are destroyed for all time until Mashiach comes, or that, no, what do you mean? They're going to come back. Like, because there is an opinion that, no, they were wiped off the face of the planet for all eternity. So you guys can look that up in the 10th chapter of Masechet Rosh Hashanah, in the Mishnah, not in the Gemara. Anyway, so Yirmiyahu writes all this as a ping pong match, and then Ezra comes along, and he writes the David stories, and he writes, but he skips 2 characters. He completely skipped Shaul, just literally rewrites Sefer Shmuel without Shaul's reign. Basically, he mentions him in passing, and he completely skips Mamlechet Yisrael, the 10 tribes. He only writes about the Davidic dynasty and their entire career. And it's like, what? Well, that's not fair. Like, what do you mean? That's such a slanted way of recording Jewish history. What's going on? And there are other differences. Now, the reason for this difference is, one, when Yirmiyahu is alive, so the reason that he's writing his book is to, his book is a lot more negative than Ezra's, right? Ezra's book doesn't record a lot of the sins, doesn't record a lot of the negativity, and Yirmiyahu, on the contrary, seems to focus on the negativity, right? He literally focuses on Shlomo, yeah, he was pretty good, but let me tell you, you know what? You know that he did avodah zarah with all of his wives, and you know what? He sinned, and he didn't even listen to Hashem properly. He didn't fulfill the mitzvahs. He had too many horses, and he didn't listen to Sefer Dvarim when it says you're not allowed to have more than 18 wives. And he's always focusing on the bad of every single king's career and of the Jewish people. And it's like, ugh, what a grouch. What's up with that? So he's not being a grouch. The reason he wrote his book is to sort of step back and take a look at what can we learn from this, because nothing happens stam without a reason. If this atrocity befell us, what takeaway lesson can we learn from this so that we just don't repeat it again? Like, because how foolish would we be if we don't learn from our mistakes and then we just simply go through it again and again and again, like we've seen in Jewish history umpteen times. So basically, he's showing the cyclicalness of the mistakes that the Jewish people made, very similar to what Shmuel did in Sefer Shoftim. And basically, he wrote it very negatively, not in order to be a curmudgeon, but to say, look, you see, this is a mine. Don't step on that. The mine is planted right there. I've put a big red X on it. When you're walking through the timeline of history, don't step on it. Don't go there again. And basically, Ezra, who he's living at a time where, he's not going to mention the 10 tribes because no one has anything to do with them. No one knows where they are. People have lost contact with them for probably a century and a half. Right? Ezra is the beginning of Bayit Sheni. So the only Jewish people that exist are Yehuda and Binyamin. That's it. And that's why to this day, 2,500 years later, we're still called Yehudim, right? From the tribe of Judah. Because that's who's left. There are no Reuvenim, Gadim, Menashim, well, except for the Bnei Menashe from, Burma, right? So that's a question like, wow, are they legit? Sapir, you look perplexed. You didn't hear about the Bnei Menashe? So in India, like in the Burmese border, there was this tribe. They were not halakhically Jewish, but they had many, many traditions, and they considered themselves, Sarplak can hold your question one sec, and they considered themselves to be descendants of the 10 tribes. That was their Masorah. In fact, even in Burma, they were called the Manasa. That was their name. And all of the residents, the natives of the area used to point out, say, you guys are strangers. You guys came thousands of years ago from a faraway place. You guys, you're foreigners. You don't belong here. If you guys want to see a really, really cool movie, I can't recommend this enough. One of the greatest movies done about the 10 tribes is called The Quest for the Lost Tribes. Pretty sure it's still up on YouTube by Simcha Yakubovich. Some of his stuff is sketchy. I mean, he's a friend of mine. I know him personally. But he did such stupendous work. He spent 4.5 years risking his life, wandering all of Asia with a Tanach in one hand and holding the hand of the top academics in Assyriology, in ancient Near East, like literally the who's who of the entire world, saying, let's find these 10 tribes. Do we have any fingerprints left? And he does a stupendous, stupendous job. So he actually went to Burma and he went to interview the Manasa. And then, so basically, you can find, these Chayalim that with their like ruddy complexion, with interesting features, and they are converted B'nai Menashe. There was a Rav Avichail Zal, that he took it upon himself to help them come back because they desperately wanted to. They wanted to be part of the Jewish people to come back to Israel. And so he helped them go through a kosher giur. So we have tons of beautiful B'nai Menashe people that are halachic Jews 100%. And yeah, they've returned. Of course they need to convert. They themselves will tell you, what do you mean? We intermarried and assimilated over thousands of years, of course. But like they had, for example, they used to eat pork, but they used to put ashes on it before they ate it because they knew they weren't allowed to, but they didn't remember why they weren't allowed to. And they had all kinds of interesting traditions, which Simcha covers in his movie. So anyway, so basically, yeah, I thought B'nai Menashe was like a common, like they actually settled in Gush Katif. When there was still Gush Katif, they were sent there and they like thrived there. And so it was just a big blow when they were expelled. Anyway, so basically, all that we have is Yehuda to this day, technically, Yehuda and Binyamin, right? And Levi, smushed in there. So Ezra's only writing about Yehuda, but there's another reason. He's predominantly positive because the Jewish people are so entrenched in the mire of Gullus that they're like, nah, we're never going to come back. No, there's no hope for us. Hashem destroyed Shlomo's Beis HaMikdash. That's it, it's over. That's it, finished. We're all going to die in Gullus until the end of time. And so Ezra has the hard job of like being this big cheerleader. Rah, rah, sis, boomba, you can do it. Come on, Jewish people. And it's like, It's really, really hard. So basically, that's why he stays away from negativity, because it's just not going to work for this population. And so basically, he focused on the good, saying, look what can be done. So he plays up certain stories where the Jewish people did teshuvah, because he's like, look what's possible. And so he plays up David's glory. And for example, he skips the story of Bathsheba, right? All the chapters that appear in Shmuel Bet, the son of Bathsheba, are like, they're not whitewashed. He's like, what's the point? I'm going to tell the Jewish people that we screwed up. Oh, that's going to help them like not be depressed. No. So he doesn't skip it because he's trying to whitewash or censor the Tanakh. He's like, but he has a clear agenda, which is to lift the chins of the Jewish people, saying, get out of the muck, get out of the ashes. You're finished mourning. Get up and dance. Get up, get up. So that's why he focuses on the positive and writes to Judah. So basically, Yirmiyahu, he's going to be consistently playing up the negative in order to be that voice of, I'm teaching you a lesson here so you guys don't screw up again. Okay, so that's why he's never going to be able to fully celebrate Shlomo's glory, because he's like, no, that's just going to get people into complacency. So you can kind of see the relationship between Yirmiyahu and Ezra as kind of like what David HaMelech wrote about Sur Merah ve'aseh tov, right? Leaving the bad and then actively doing good in order to get to the ideal situation. So Yirmiyahu is our Sur Merah, get away from the bad, so that you can go to Ezra's Aseh Tov. Now it's time to go and make Aliyah and build the second temple. Stop whining and crying and mourning. Enough already. The 70 years are over. Get up. So, throughout all of the stories of Shlomo that we're going to read in Melachim, there's always going to be criticism. And the reason I'm saying this is because we're going to notice that he's never going to allow Shlomo to celebrate the good and the victories. And we even see that already here. It's already very subtly planted. Like, last time I wrote about, like the thing I posted today and spoke about last time, you already have the foreshadowing for Shlomo's downfall of his glorious career already in the Glory Days chapters, because Yirmiyahu was like, look, the seeds of destruction were already planted there. It's like, don't be surprised. Nothing's perfect, which is another agenda that Tanach consistently has, which we spoke about, that the Tanakh wants us to stay away from this perception that things can be perfect. Even Shlomo's not perfect. Being a human means being inherently flawed, and that is our beauty. It's not something we should have a chip in our shoulders about. It's something we should be proud of. Yes, we're flawed. God knows how flawed we are, and he loves us for it because he loves how much we try. If we were not flawed, our efforts would be meaningless. Everything we do, everything we did would be meaningless. So the effort is in filling the lack. So it's not like, Shlomo's a loser because he's not perfect. On the contrary. So basically, who is writing now and speaking is Yirmiyahu. And so he's basically saying, okay, this is the cabinet he put together. And we see that there's already like tension there. In fact, I'm just telling you right now, sometimes you have names that are mentioned in Tanakh and you never hear from them again. I'm telling you that there's one character that seems to be a completely trivial character in chapter 4. He's going to meet a very grisly demise. We're going to see him again. And that's going to really shed light on Shlomo's career. About this character who seems to be just a simple bureaucrat. And it's like, whoa, he's going to be the canary in the mine. You guys are familiar with this expression? The canary in the coal mine? Okay, just making sure. That he's going to really, really shed light on the fact that not everything was kumbaya in Shlomo's time. So it's true that he does say, Ish tachat gafno tachat teinato, everybody's sitting under their fig tree and under their, vineyard, and everyone has plenty. But we note that whenever an empire is great, that doesn't happen from out of nowhere. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. So you guys asked, why are there 12? First of all, they're called netzivim. In your translations, how do they translate netziv?
I think, was it princesses or princes, I think?
Officers. Princess doesn't make sense. That's a nasikh. It wouldn't be a nasikh. It would be, maybe technically two of them were princes. Why were technically two of them princes? Because Shlomo gave him his daughter, gave two of the officers his daughters, right? That they're in marriage, right? So officers, does it say what kind of officers they were? Do we know what their duties were, what their official position was? So in a nutshell, they were tax collectors, because that's simply how you have funds for military, for any major thing. Oh, hi, hello, such as building a base of Hamikdash that is made out of gold and cedar and like exquisite gems, like for the Kohen Gadol's, uniform. So you have to have money from somewhere. So now, why are there 12 officers? And Sapir, you asked this. Sarplak and commissioners, also excellent translation. That's fine. That's a good translation. They're bureaucrats, right? They're not necessarily royal family, except for the two that actually did marry Shlomo's daughters, right? So Sarah suggests from the 12 tribes. That would make sense. But do we have any way of knowing, was each officer from a different tribe? To collect money. That's true. That's their job, right? But why are there 12? Did Shlomo give them his daughters to calm them down, like we saw in the Korean stuff? I'm still researching that. I don't think so. I mean, obviously it's politics, right? So just hold that thought, Sarah, okay? Hold that thought. We'll probably answer it soon. One for each month. Exactly. So Gemma said one for each month. So wait a second. So what about the 12 tribes? So how did he decide which officers, like were all the officers from the same tribe? Do we know? This should be a no-brainer, ladies. Pshat.
When they be from Judah?
Well,
Yehuda?
you tell me. What does the Pshat say? Where were they from? Sarah Ben Shimon, they were Kohanim, not all of them. It's true that many of them were correct, but not everybody. But again, also them being Kohanim. So Leah says they were from all over. But do we have representation, one leader from each tribe? For example, this week's Parasha is Chet HaMeraglim. And we're told in Parashat Shlach, right? Lemate Reuven, Shamua ben Zakur, Lemate Shimon, Shafat ben Chori, Lemate Yehuda, Kalev ben Yefuneh, right? Like we literally have tribe by tribe, and so with the Meraglim, 12 tribes, and each tribe was represented. So is that the case here? Well, how would we know? What do the psukim actually tell us? What information does the psukim tell us about these officers? It tells us they're what? And if someone says name, wrong, it doesn't even tell us their name. Sometimes we're told their name, but sometimes we're only told the father's name, right? Like Ben Hur. And now if anybody wants to know where that famous novel got their name, ta-da, now you know where it's from. Ben Hur, played by Charlton Heston. Yes, that's where they got the name for Sefer Melachim. Were they scribes? Were all of them scribes? I don't know that they needed to, because I would imagine that they had their assistants, secretaries. They were probably literate because they were, the upper echelon of society. Leah, each had a particular job. Well, no, the 12 were all the tax collectors, right? That's what kind of commissioners they were, officers. But basically, ladies, from the Pshat itself, what information are we told? We're told every time their father's name. Sometimes we're told their personal name and their father's name. And what else are we told about them? There's one other piece of information. Where are they responsible for? Right, geographical details, exactly, which, again, often Tanach students dread, right? Like Sefer Yoshua, 8 chapters of just like city, delineating the borders of the territory of each tribe. And so often those are considered very, very boring parts of Tanakh when a person doesn't know how to learn them. So here, we're given sometimes the name of one city or a list of 4 cities, which again, it's not one location, but it delineates a territory. So when we come across such a part of Tanakh, where it is just geographical detail list, what are we meant to do with this information? Are we meant supposed to just yawn and whiz through it? Or how are we supposed to tackle this?
We look at maps.
Okay, but yes, but what if the maps tell you nothing? Like, okay, now you know where Nafat Dor is. Okay, nice. So what? Beyond that, when does a map have significance? Like knowing where Yafo is and where Haifa is, it's like, okay, very good. When does it suddenly have significance?
When you know like which tribe was assigned which area.
Exactly. When there's some kind of context. Exactly. So if we were to go through city by city, because sometimes the city is mentioned in order to hyperlink to tell you, ahem, this was a famous city that was famous because it was the capital or a very metropolitan city belonging to this tribe. For example, with Yonah Hanavi, right? There's a machlokis about, like, you know, what are his origin. We're not told what tribe he's from. We're not told anything about him, but we are told Migat Chefer. Okay, thanks. So what? And so the sages are like, we have to tell you what tribe he's from. Look up where Gad Chefer is. You'll understand exactly what tribe he's from. Why do we have to tell you? And then it tells us so much about his career and about what his role was. So we already know he's not going to be speaking to Mamlechet Yehuda. He's going to be speaking to the 10 tribes because Gad Chefer was an important city belonging to one of the 10 tribes. Vechu, 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 right? So basic, right, vechu, sorry. Vechu is vechule, which is etc. in Hebrew for the non-sabres. Anyway, so basically, yes, some of the cities we immediately recognize. And so we're like, oh, okay, so I already know that the Gilad belongs to Menashe. Okay, so we noticed. But then, so the reason I was being a nutnik earlier is because with about 5 or 6 of the officers were told flat out they were in charge of Issachar. This one was in charge of Asher. This one was in charge of Naphtali. They don't make us like they don't play head games with us. Like, oh yeah, go look up where Machanaim is. Go look up where that is. It's like, no, I'm telling you straight out. This was in charge of this Shevet. Now, so whenever you guys reach a part of Tanach that seems to have a list of arbitrary random data, so the first thing we do is we try to connect the dots. We're like, okay, what is this hyperlink to? So now, did anybody actually take a look at the cities, just, you know, that didn't, like, you know, mention specifically which tribe they belong to, and try to understand, were there 12 officers because each one represented a different tribe? Are all 12 tribes represented? Wait, sorry, Flecken, did you just ask something?
Yeah. Okay, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought that this is the time when like he was only responsible for Yehuda and Binyamin, like, and the 10 other tribes were doing
Under
something
Shlomo's
else.
reign, absolutely not. He inherited all 12 tribes.
Oh.
His father successfully ruled over all 12 tribes for 33 years until David died. And so the 12 tribes have already been one homogeneous nation for 33 years under David's reign. And Shlomo rules again for another 40 years with that homogeny intact. So no, he definitely is responsible for all 12 tribes, definitely.
Okay.
That's why he appoints 12 officers. But so basically, we see when we go through the list that no, there are tribes that are missing. There were tribes that are not mentioned at all. And the question is, well, why not? Now, anyone notice the glaring omission? There's one tribe that we're just like, oh, that looks really bad. Why are they not mentioned? Why is there no officer, tax collector from this tribe? Anyone notice that there's one that just looks really sketchy? Some, it's a little less, you know, surprising, but basically one, it's just really, really sketchy. So spoiler alert, Yehuda, right? There's no and from the tribe of Judah. This was a tax collector. So basically, it's not that Judah didn't have a tax collector, it's that they themselves were divided seemingly into 12 regions, and that because that's where the king's like center was, so they were responsible for everything. So now that also when there was a leap year, if I'm not mistaken, they were the ones who were responsible for funding, like for funds for Adar Bet when there was a leap year. But basically they were the head administrators navigating everything. So the other three tribes that are missing, when we go through all the cities, they were like, oh, that's kind of weird. Why aren't they mentioned? One is Shimon. Shimon's not mentioned because what we discover is that early on, Shimon actually just assimilated fully into Yehuda. Just to get a picture, if anyone has the map that I sent in front of them or knows Israeli geography, Bichlal, so basically Shimon's territory was in the south. So south of Jerusalem, the whole Negev, the whole desert area, not up to Eilat, because only later Eilat, was later conquered, became part of Israel, even though halachically never became part of Israel. But the point is the whole Negev, the whole desert of the south, that is Shimon. And the tribe right above them is Yehuda, right, which is Jerusalem, Hebron, and everything in between there. So from Hebron southward, Arad, Beersheba, that's already Shimon, if I'm not mistaken. But Yerushalayim to Hebron, that's Yehuda. So basically, Shimon and Yehuda fused into one gigantic territory. So when it talks about Yehuda, that encapsulates Shimon. Now that was on purpose because Shimon was a problematic tribe, just in terms of their genes. They were the poop disturbers. And so basically, as we see with the story with the Moabite princesses, right? It's not arbitrary that it's Zimri ben Salu, the prince of Shimon, that he's leading the rebellion with the princess Cosbi Batsur, saying, what do you mean? Who says intermarriage is forbidden? Moshe Rabbeinu is a giant hypocrite. And what do you mean? They're beautiful. We should just all be global citizens. We shouldn't be different. And so basically, and just karmically, Yaakov in Parashat Vayechi already talks about that this is Shimon's nature, that they have a fiery, destructive nature. And so he says, I have to split them from Levi. Levi needs to be assimilated among the Jewish people. That's why they also do not inherit a territory, right? Levi is scattered from Eilat to Metula all over the Jewish people because their power is so intense that they're like a laser, but a laser that's not bridled, that's not focused, so it just burns everything. So Levi is a positive, nuclear reactor, I guess, used for positive purposes, whereas Shimon is just unbridled energy, and so they basically have to be harnessed in the vessel of Yehuda. So they basically become subsumed under Yehuda, that Yehuda is able to harness them, it's able to direct that energy. So whenever we read about Yehuda, we also have Shimon subsumed in there. Later Binyamin joins also, but that's much later. So basically, Reuven and Gad are the other two tribes that are also AWOL. And the answer is that why they were subsumed under Menashe, even though they broke off and said, we're not going to cross, the Jordan. We're going to stay here in modern-day Jordan, right? The Trans-Jordan. We're going to stay. We're not entering Israel. But they were very weak. And again, we could do a wider character study of Reuven and Gad. And so basically, half of Menashe, which is a very powerful tribe, they volunteered to stay with Gad and Reuven in the Transjordan, and they basically grabbed the steering wheel. And so Reuven and Gad become subsumed culturally under Menashe, which is why, if you notice, if you were to go through and check which cities hyperlink to what, there's a disproportionate amount of officers from Menashe. Because Menashe A has that representation from both sides of the Jordan. Because Menashe inherited a dual portion, right? Menashe inherited a territory in the Transjordan as well as on the western side of the Jordan. So if I'm not mistaken, I think that there are 4 officers from Menashe that also covers Reuven and Gad. And then the last tribe that is not mentioned is Zvulun, because again, Zvulun, they are the Siamese twins karmically of Naphtali. Naphtali was more dominant personality, and so Zvulun was subsumed under them as well. So Naphtali is mentioned, right? Achimaatz is the officer for Naphtali. It's mentioned overtly. And basically, our sages say, yeah, this Zvulun is part of that. And even geographically, they're in proximity one to the other. So they're together. So what's interesting is that in Shlomo's cabinet and in his whole approach, he's not into sameness, meaning he's not a communist, which is really interesting. He doesn't say, okay, there's going to be 12 tribes, and every tribe has to pay the same amount of taxes and the same everything because everything has to be fair. He's like, that's ridiculous. Menashe is a gigantic tribe that has double the amount of population and territory and everything from, let's say, Gad Reuven, why should they have to pay the same amount of taxes? That's ridiculous. So that's why he divided up the territories for the officers for taxes, not based on the territories of inheritance that Joshua gave each tribe, but according to population and according to income tax bracket, and just basically saying, yeah, there's more Menashe, they're very wealthy and powerful, they need to be more responsible. So basically, the 12 is to create the sense of unity, to create the impression of 12 tribes. But if you look deeper, it's not actually, oh, this is from Reuven and this is from Shimon and whatever. And another place where we see a similar dynamic is in Sefer Shoftim. Just a little cheat tip, if anyone ever wants to learn Sefer Shoftim, so if you were to zoom out, it seems like it's just an arbitrary list of Shoftim, like it just seems like an arbitrary guy or girl pops up when there's times of trouble for the Jewish people. You know, oh wow, the Canaanites are torturing us. Oh no, what should we do? And all of a sudden, after like kvetching enough, suddenly Bora's like, okay, I'm done with this. Forget this. And we're told what city she's from. We're not told that much about her. We're not told who her father is, told who her husband is, even though it's not his real name, as the Midrash and Eliyahu Rabbah tells us. And we're told where she's from. That's supposed to tell us which tribe she's from, right? Which tells us where she ruled. So when the entire story of Dvorah takes place in the north, we're not supposed to be surprised because she's from a northern tribe. And that's where things occur. So basically, the interesting thing, when we zoom out and we count all of the major and minor judges mentioned in Sefer Shoftim, it comes to a grand total of how many Shoftim? Drum roll, please. How many do you think? How many judges are mentioned in the book of Judges? 13. Now, the interesting thing, you can do the same exercise here in the book of Judges, you know, as in this chapter of Melachim, is that look at where the judges mentioned, we're told almost always what city he's from. Again, it's meant to hyperlink to, so he's from this tribe and he's from this tribe. So our sages in Masechet, is it Avodah Zarah, I think, I don't remember exactly, says that the reason that there's 13 is because each tribe presented, you know, a judge. There was leadership from each tribe. And why 13? Oh my God, I'm blanking on the point of the last one. Okay, I have to remember to look that up. But basically, but when we zoom out, and if you just look at the information, once again, there's a parallel. I don't know what the sages were based on. I have to open up the Gemara. I think it's in Avodah Zarah that says that each tribe is represented. When I looked it up in real time, I saw that there were 4 judges from Menashe, although one guy could hardly be called a judge because he was a villain. But our sages call him a judge. But basically, it's a very similar breakdown to Shlomo. So we see is that the Jewish people as a nation, we've gone through such an evolution. It's not like, okay, there's 12 tribes, and everything kind of developed in a vacuum, and everything was kumbaya. We're going to see is that Shlomo's reign is, he's going to have to be like, basically orchestrating and like, not composing, oh my God, conducting over, you know, very dominant personalities. And so we'll see how Yirmiyahu presents that, you know. But so now people ask, so wait a second, why did he give his daughters to certain officers? So one of them I'm truly perplexed by because it's not like a very dominant tribe, but the other one is because really he just wants to, you know, form an allegiance with a very dominant tribe. That just makes sense. And could it be that that guy was, you know, a powerful leader that, you know, he needed to clip his wings? I don't know. I'd have to look that up. But basically, that's it on the big picture with the whole list of like, basically the main point of this particular shiur was to give you guys tools when you get to a boring part of Tanach, which in general is perceived as the more bureaucratic part of Tanach. And again, they're not lacking, which led the Bible critics and academics to say, oh, different authors. The reason the genre, you know, switches so abruptly from sweeping saga stories, romantic sagas, to like technocrat, like, you know, and this, the census,
and the laws and the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant, and it's exactly 300 cubits by 300 cubits by 10 cubits. Like, they're just like different authors. There's author J and E and P, and it's just like, wow, really? You're not familiar with authors that are just able to like be diverse as authors? Like, they're able to diversify and write different genres. So when you get to a boring part of Tanakh, you know, that's very detail oriented, there is a method to the madness. And it's not just like we're trying to preserve details for the sake of preserving details, because we spoke about this last time. The Tanakh is not a history book. We have zero interest in preserving details. If the point of the Tanakh would be to preserve details, wow, it would have been written so much better. Like, as a history book, I would give the Tanakh a raging F. It was written so poorly, such a shoddy job of like fact preservation, because that's not the point. So basically the facts that are mentioned, that are preserved, it's a historiography book in order to hyperlink to a context, to raise associations. So you could literally do this play by play with all the bureaucratic stories, the details that are mentioned. It's like, what picture emerges when we connect the dots from the bureaucratic details mentioned. I'm trying to remember other questions that people had. Anyone remember their questions? Still have like a few minutes. Just one last point I wanted to make is that after we have the bureaucratic list of the, administration, so basically there's a list of Shlomo's grand achievements, right? It switches tone again. And what is the focus that repeats, like what we said, milah mancha, like a flag word, that repeats over and over and over again throughout the rest of chapter 4 and predominantly chapter 5? What is the focus? Emphasizing Shlomo's what? Which contribution? Sarah Blaken's wondering about Kechola Sheryl Sfatayam, like the Jewish people were plentiful. You had written, oh, is this an actualization of the prophecy to Avraham Avinu? The answer is yes. Part of the description, it says from Titzach to Aza, that Shlomo's borders, like range, that he expanded. It's to show that Shlomo ruled over the promised land that was promised to Avraham Avinu, because as we learn from the Tanakh, there's Eretz Canaan, which is from Beersheba to the Golan or Methulah. And then there's the Promised Land, which is from the Nile to the Euphrates, and it's two very, very different countries. One is optional. One is a prophecy said to Avraham Avinu in the covenant of the portions, Brit Ben Abtarim, that your children will be able to do this if they go for it. Meaning, I'm not going to force them. Like Eretz Canaan is Yareg Val Yavor, like that you have to die rather than sacrifice any grain of sand from, Eretz Yisrael, this little tiny strip, right? But in terms of expanding your borders, by all means. So there's Eretz HaMuftachat, the promised land, and then there's Eretz Canaan. It's two different prophecies. Shlomo is the first to actually bring to reality what Avraham Avinu was promised in Brit Ben Abtarim, hence the details. And so yes, Sarah, when you're hearing, it reminds you of the promises of Avraham Avinu, that Yirmiyahu made that association very deliberately. Sorry, keep pushing sand. Okay. Ochlim v'shotim. What's the question on that? Why does it mention that everybody drinks and eats and has plenty? What's the question on that? I mean, on the pshat level, I thought it sounded like it wasn't a good thing. Why? Why wouldn't it be a good thing? How could it be a negative thing? What, that they're like materialistic? Okay. So what the Hasidic masters say is the reason that's there is they're continuing that line of thought of the moon being full, right? That in Shlomo's time they rectified everything. In fitting with what we've been discussing this whole time, Shlomo rectified the sin of the Garden of Eden. He rectified everything. There's no more Gashmias. What the sages say is in Shlomo's time, they're able to eat and drink and be merry, but not in like a physical way in the sense of like, wow, let's pig out. It was like they're able to literally bring everything, like make a dwelling place below all the way down, that they were able to elevate everything. So Hasidic masters talk about the eating and drinking. The way they put it, They ate and they drank, but they did not taste anything physically. They enjoyed everything sheerly spiritually for the ability to simply elevate the physical, which is why in his time they built the Beis Hamikdash, because they were able to elevate everything physical. On the level of Pshat, it's just to show what a great leader he was, that he had plenty and abundance in his time for his entire reign, for his entire population. So that's on the level of Pshat, but Chassidus says no, because there's a deeper level. One of the things that it really sticks out is that it gives two examples of how much plenty. It does say everyone sat under their fig tree and grape tree, okay. But when it talks about quantities of food, it singles out two different categories of food to show, whoa, they were loaded. Their bellies were full. They literally had everything. What are the two things mentioned? Everybody had a crazy busy week and no one got to the reading this week. Okay, I get it. So one, it mentions how much bread and how much flour. It says how much food it was for Shlomo. Right, that the nation provided. Right? Like, it's not that, okay, he pigs out. It's just like, wow, they had such abundance. It talks about the meat and the bread. And one of the commentaries that I read said, well, why doesn't it mention the wine? Because in a different place, it does mention the wine. I think it's Sefer Mishlei. And the commentary was like, I don't understand. Like, it should also mention they had wine flowing in the streets. Like, I don't know, find some kind of like beautiful way to say it. So the flag word that is the scarlet thread that weaves its way through all the different angles is chokhmah. Right? I'm going to, beat this to death again, because that really is the focus of Shlomo's career. Again, as a positive and as a negative, as we'll see, that basically he's so smart, he knows how to do this, and the nations are coming and they respect him because of the chokhmah, chokhmah mikol adam. The whole focus of chapter 5 is chokhmah, chokhmah, chokhmah. So another tip, wheat always is the icon in Tanach and in the sages' literature for chokhmah. That is the icon. Whereas grapes and wine is always the icon for Binah. So what Shlomo is always asking for is Binah, because Chokhmah characterizes him in his essence, but it characterizes his reign. So it's not surprising that to characterize the abundance of his nation, the bread, the flour, the wheat, because the constellation of words surrounding this is Chacham, Chokhmah, look how much Chokhmah he had. To say that there was an abundance of bread, there was an abundance of chokhmah. Everybody was full and satiated from the bread, from the chokhmah. The basar that's mentioned is a different thing, because it's interesting. It doesn't talk about goats and sheep. It mentions specifically venison and like the wild animals that are like optional, right? Like deers and gazelles, the 7 chayot teorot, the undomesticated animals that are kosher, like buffalo and like gazelles and whatever. So that was the other thing I mentioned. So it just makes sense that wine wouldn't be mentioned, because it's not the focus of the chapter. That's not what it's trying to convey. It's not talking about Bina. It's talking about Chokhmah. Sarah Plotkin, you had another question, or that was basically it?
I had one more question.
Yeah, shoot.
Sorry. Because like we go and we say about all the things about like how Shlomo is so wise and whatnot. And he knew all about the trees, right? And all about the animals and whatnot.
Okay.
And then
he sent this in.
When he goes to Hiram, he goes and he's like, nobody knows like you guys know.
Okay. So it's not that they don't know, it's that he doesn't have. Because Israel is mostly desert, so we don't have like powerful trees growing here. And so basically he needed like really high quality trees like cedar that grows up north. So in the Golan, you already have some like nice forests, and then certainly higher up, right, in Lebanon, in Syria. And so Hiram is the king of Tzor, right, ancient Tyre, which was both Lebanon and Syria, if I'm not mistaken. Tzor v'Tzidon, those used to be one country. And so basically he's saying, look, let's trade resources. And I never appreciated if anyone knows the board game, The Settlers of Catan, anyone? I guess you have to. The point is my boys just taught me to play, and it's like, I'll trade you rocks for, wood. And it's like, yeah, basically. So yeah, he's basically saying, look, this is a resource I have. I want your wood because I don't have enough wood and I need to build stuff. I need to build roads and a Beit HaMikdash, and so, we need that. Sarah, or I don't remember who it was, or maybe it was Yusuf here. Somebody sent in saying, in the whole part that talks about the greatness of Shlomo's wisdom is Chokhmah, why does it mention B'nai Kedem? Which of you was it that said, like, what? Who are B'nai Kedem Bichlal? Who are these people? First of all, where is Kedma? Where is Kedem in the Tanach? What do we call it in modern Hebrew? Which direction is it? First of all, Sarah Plagan, very good. East, Mizrach. Right, exactly. One of the reasons that Kedem, right, because Kadima means straightforward, right? Why is Mizrach called Mizrach? Why is East called Mizrach in Hebrew? What's the root?
Hashemesh Zoachat.
B'diuk! The sun rises in the east. And why is west Ma'arav? Right? Ma'arav, Erev, evening, the sun sets. The sun rises in the east, it sets in the west. So it's very simple. So why is Kedma Mizrach? Because you're always facing where the sun rises. You're always like starting your journey like that's the place you're facing. So the interesting thing is that Kedma has an interesting association in Tanach. It always hyperlinks to some very interesting things. Every single time a biblical character messes up, in Bereshit specifically, he is always sent to Kedem. So Adam HaRishon is sent Kedem. Cain, sent to Kedem. Lot goes Kedma also, right? So it's associated with the dark side. Ironic, I know, right? The place where the sun rises. But I mean by the dark side, like the Darth Vader side of dark side, not like actually dark side, the dark powers. So on the one hand, it's considered tremendous wisdom, but wisdom de klipa. So basically, not like too much knowledge. Like for example, black magic, right? So yes, obviously there are a lot of people who practice black magic today that is just sleight of hand. It's illusion, it's nonsense, like David Blaine or whatever, like they're not actually, tapping into forces. But black magic does exist. Like it's a real power that certain gurus in India, too much, I'll take care of you. Not exactly. The point is, what we're told is that Avram, after Sarah dies, he marries Keturah. According to the Midrash, it is, who's Keturah?
Hagal.
Exactly. But according to Pshat, it's another woman, and he has 6 children with her, 6 sons. And then before he passes away, it says he gives these 6 children gifts, and he sends them east. So if anyone during their time in Israel, met Gutman Locks, right, in the old city, otherwise known as Guru Gil, a nickname that he hates, but, holy Yid that spends his days putting tefillin on Yid. And by the way, his Facebook page is awesome. I highly recommend, just stalking him because yeah. Anyway, but basically he spent 20 years in India as a guru, just because, again, he grew up in America, didn't know anything about Yiddishkeit. And at some point mastered all of the ancient wisdoms and the Eastern wisdoms. And then at some point got really bummed out because he was like, wow, if I'm like the pinnacle of existence, man, that sucks. So he just left his ashram, left his pillar that he literally sat on a pillar, and people like coming to him, asking him, oh, guru, teach me, train me, heal me, whatever. And so he just wandered the world until he found himself in Israel, standing in front of the Kotel saying, God, it's me, Margaret. No, just kidding. God, if you're there, it's me, Gil. What do I do? And then all of a sudden, a shaliach tapped him on the shoulder saying, did you put tefillin on today yet? He's like, tefillin, what tefillin? And then, antenna, charge, wah! And so to this day, since 1985, if I'm not mistaken, that's what he does. He just stands there at the kotel putting tefillin on people. And Friday night, oh yeah, Talia hasn't talked. He's awesome. He's mamish awesome. And then Friday night he has I don't know if he still does this, but he used to have dozens of people at his house for a vegetarian Friday night meal every single week. You just walk right in, and he just, depending on the source of your soul and what he felt was right for you, he would either rip into you or he would be really kind. I know because I sent students decades ago to him, and they were like, oh, he was such a sweetie. But the Mir boys who are at the table with us, boy, did he destroy them. So anyway, but the point is that How did I get to Gil? Right. So Gil in his book describes, because he went through the sources, saying that who are these Bnei Kedem and what are the gifts that Avram Avinu gave them. So the reason there is a parallel between the chakra system in the different forms of yoga, whether it's Chinese yoga or Indian yoga, the reason there's so many parallels with minor details and nuances being off, but the big picture is almost identical to the Jewish energetic system of, the Sfirot and where they are in the body, because everything comes from Avram Avinu. And he also says that's the reason why the highest level of, caste or class in India, they're called Brahmins, from the word Avraham. And he basically said that what are these gifts that Avraham gave Bnei Keturah before he sent them east? To the secrets of life. That the chakras and the way life, circles or flows through the body, all the secrets of manipulating energy and teva and nature, that's what he gave them. But what happened was, because he sent them east, it all became avodah zarah. So instead of understanding that there's one Hashem and everything comes from Hashem, it's like, oh no, there's this God and this goddess and it's in charge of this chakra, it's in charge of this, and in charge of that, and it's just like a mess. So that's what I mean by the dark side, where the power becomes an end instead of being just a mean. And that's really the source of all of Avodah Zarah, right? The Rambam talks about that instead of seeing the sun as just, wow, it's God's servant that God created in order to give us light and heat and help photosynthesis along so we can have what to eat, it's like, no, I'm going to worship the sun. And I'm going to try to tap into the sun's energy and only worship it. The moon, ditto, stars, ditto, planets, ditto, etc. So Sapir, he has a bunch of books. He has a book called The Raging Mind. That's one that I'm referring to, where it's more of a theoretical book. He also, his biography is amazing, but he has a whole slew of books. He has There Is One. The Lubavitch Rebbe himself wrote approbation, a haskama, for Gil's books. And the Rebbe never wrote approbations, but he wrote for Gil's books. He said, these books are actually like, people should learn this. Anyway, so basically, Bnei Kedem are a symbol of like power that is so powerful that evil hijacks it, but it doesn't take away from the fact that there's tremendous truth in there. So that's why it's very magnetic, it's very attractive, and it's also the highest level from a certain perspective. So basically, it says that Shlomo even managed to master Bnei Kedem's wisdom, once again, a hint that he rectified it. And the Hasidic masters talk about, what does it mean that the Chachmei Mitzrayim and Chachmei Bnei Kedem, that he even surpassed the wisdom of the Egyptians at Bnei Kedem. Technically, in their time, these were the deepest wisdoms. And basically, the Alter Rebbe talks about that part of why the Nile is called the Pishon, one of the four rivers, he said each of the four rivers corresponds to the different Sfirot, that there's Chokhmah, Binah, the six that we call Zah, and then Malchut, right? So it says Pishon is Keneged Chokhmah. That's why Egypt is the seat of all Chokhmah. He said that's why Shlomo married Bat Paro. Through marrying her, he was able to elevate all the Chokhmot. And as we'll see, Shlomo isn't home free from the threat of Egypt, and we'll see how the dynamic changes between him and Egypt. But at least for the time being, Shlomo reached level that he was able to destroy all the klipot and liberate every type of light and spark, including Bnei Kedem, including Mitzrayim. That he was able to bring that type of God awareness, that people were no longer distracted by ends versus means. Everyone understood there is one, everything is from God. And so just yearning for that, just yearning for godliness. And that is the focus of the Chokhmah here, of the unity, because Chokhmah is unity, right? Unlike Binah, which is analysis and separation. So here it's talking about the Chokhmah as a unifying factor. He was able to rectify everything. But let's not get too comfy and too excited. This doesn't last, just like being human doesn't last, right? Every one of us will be daffodil fertilizer one day. And so Shlomo too, even his glory, because it was human, was temporary. And Yirmiyahu is trying to give us a heads up saying, people, I'm trying to save you a lot of heartache in the future. So yes, we can appreciate the good, but heads up on the minds that are already waiting for us throughout this. Okay. So for next week, it's going to be a bunch of chapters, just because it's like a unit, the description of starting to build the Beit HaMikdash. I'll take a look at it and see if the chapters are very long, maybe we'll break it up. I may give you additional homework to compare and contrast the description of the Beit HaMikdash construction with the Mishkan. So we'll see. I'm gonna try to find isolated chapters, but yes, there will be homework to compare and contrast the construction of each, so that because the story is written in order to shed light on the construction. It's not just like some bureaucratic architect's instruction manual. It was composed as literature in order that we should double click on the hyperlinks and see, oh, it connects to Parashat Trumat, Tetzaveh, Vayakhel Pekudei. Oh, got it. All right. Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you.